Hello, we are live. Let's see, how's that look? Pretty good. So, yeah, as you can see, we're in a new setup, a new place. Welcome. Uh, it's still adjusting. Happy to be back. Tying flies. So, if you see me looking over this side of the screen, I actually have my computer monitor off to my right now. And it's a little bit further than it was. I'm still working some of these kinks out, but yeah, welcome. Today's a weekend fly tying stream, probably the first one in almost 2 months, I think, or maybe more than 2 months. Uh, and a lot has happened in that time. So we are going to sit, we're going to work on a fly, and we're going to talk a little bit. And I think we're going to work on a fly. So yeah. Let's see. So I got a new streaming set. Focus. Yeah, look at that way. So the biggest change, well, a number of things have changed. So the reason why I haven't been streaming quite as much. That's almost too close. One of the reasons, or the reason why I haven't been streaming quite as much recently is that, well, things have been rather busy. Excuse me, in the state of Virginia. Um, we had like most of the country, we had a major surge in COVID 19 cases starting early September. And because I work for um, a local health department, I, of course, was involved in trying to mitigate that. And of course, we had to ramp up our activities in response to the surge in cases. Um, you can't leave something like that unattended. um, so yeah, so that was a very busy time for me in particular, and then on top of that, my wife and I we moved house. Actually, we moved from an apartment to a house, um, and so we had all that attendant chaos. And there are still things in boxes, and there's still things. We've pretty much gone from things in boxes on the floor to things out of boxes on the floor. So we are still working on moving, but um, as you can see, as a result of moving, I've got a new streaming setup, and this setup is designed so that I can just leave my stuff up. I don't have to change it. Hopefully, that means there'll be better lighting. Um, Things will be more consistent, and it'll be a little less effort because I don't have to keep tearing down my entire setup every time I want to do something else on the desk. Um, so yeah, and as a part of that, always looking to increase the quality of the streams. I took some of the money that from the Etsy shop, and I bought a new studio light, and also mounts for that. So again, hopefully that'll make things a little bit more consistent because we can use the same light setup um, every single time we stream. Still got some of the old things, and of course got like the microphone. We're we're working. I'm working on where best to put the monitor so that I can you know see the stream and any relevant information, and also look at chat. If people type in chat. But yeah. It is. It's nice to be back in streaming. I haven't tied in a good couple of months, so hopefully fingers remember what to do. And so we are tying a silver gray today. We're using a Ron Lucas 3/0 Millward Bartlett hook and real gut, real silkworm gut. For the blind eye. Let's see. What else can I tell you about the new place? Obviously, the backdrop we're going to work on. Still have the old case, but where it is right now, you can't see it. So we'll work on stuff. We'll get it all looking nice and tidy. But yeah. So, as always with the blind eye hook, I do want to be a little bit careful about the amount of bulk that I am adding and the transition that I create, especially in this area of the fly, because this fly, silver gray, as you may know, has an all tinsel body, and that does present a challenge because having an all tinsel body, it will show lumps and bumps more readily than a dub, even a silk body, but especially like a dubbed body. So we do have to be a little bit more conscientious about what kind of bulk we're adding to the fly, how many, you know, how lumpy it is or how smooth it is. We always want the body to be smooth, even if the body material itself has texture. Okay. Enough. Do an underbody, and we'll probably this is a 3/0 hook, so we'll do probably three layer underbody. Again, still using the Vivus gel spun for this, although like I've always said, this is not my first choice. Definitely prefer something that is a little less slippery. The like Ultra Thread or something. Unistretch. It's generally easier to tie on top of. Now, the one thing about this house is that there's no door to the basement where the office is, or where the streaming setup is. So hopefully, whatever is happening on the first floor, which I can hear, but hopefully the mic isn't picking it up. If you're new to salmon flies, one of the reasons why we add an underbody is to help give the fly a little bit more bulk. A lot of times, if you're putting something like floss or tinsel directly onto a hook, it ends up being very, very skinny. And because these flies, the way these flies are dressed, the body does need a little added bulk to look or not be lost. Especially if you have a fly that has, a full gaudy wing, like a lot of salmon flies do. Sorry about my bobbin. I also realized, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but today could be the International Fly Tying Symposium. So uh, I haven't been to that in a couple of years, obviously because of the pandemic. But even before then, it was getting hard to travel to it. Things that were going on. I used to go regularly, first as an attendee, but then as a presenter, a vendor. Um, I have been thinking about getting back into going to shows. I know uh, there are some closer, shows that are closer to home um, coming up. Sorry, this Bodkin plus or this Bobbin plus this Vivus spool. It just doesn't seem to like it all that much. But so like there's the Maryland Fly Fishing Show, which I believe is up in Towson. Um, there's there's an antique and that might be the Maryland show. There's a couple of shows in Maryland, and then there's the Virginia Wine and Fly Fishing Show down, I think, near Richmond. Um, I've been looking into those. I guess one of the handicaps that those shows have is for fly tires who, like myself, don't really make any money from these shows. They aren't free even for us, and that does make them a little bit financially more difficult for people in my situation to justify going to, especially if you have to buy and get accommodations. Um, but anyway, so that's yeah. I don't know what it is about this bobbin and this spool. Sorry, I do apologize. All right, good enough. So we'll just finish this. Um, Now you'll notice, this extra bulk where the blind eye is. It largely is where the throat will be. So very little of the body should actually be impacted by that extra bulk, which is good. All right, so we'll go back to our fine thread. Usually about 70 deniers. Uh, a lot of people ask me, what do you use? And I say, if you're tying flies, regardless of what kind of fly you're tying, but especially something which, you know, is presentational, like Atlantic salmon flies, or if it has a floss body or a tinsel body, um, you really want to use a thread that can lay flat, that you can untwist and lay flat. So um, like wax mono thread isn't always that great because you can't untwist it as easily and to get it to lay flat. So if you see me spinning my bobbin like that, um, that is to untwist my thread and get it to lay flat against the hook or whatever I'm tying. And that's and tying with flat thread is actually really important for um, you know bulk management essentially. The flatter you can get your thread to lay, the less bulk you'll have on your fly, and that it's actually a good. It's a good thing to be able to do or know how to do, even for things that you would not spend so much time on, like fishing flies. It does make, if you're trying to go for like a slim body on a hex pattern or something, being able to tie with flat thread just does make it a little bit neater and a little bit less bulky. It if you're going for a smooth body, so for example, if you're tying a Bergman style wet and you want a smooth uh, floss body, being able to tie with flat thread or being able to manage that bulk by using flat thread is really key. Just gonna wind on tip and tag. And as always, when I tie things off, I'm actually tying things off in the horizontal plane when it's early on in the fly. So for example, the tip and the tag, I tie on either the front side or the back side of the hook. But then when I start tying things down the body, I'll tie them under the hook. And again, that's because I want to be able to balance the bulk on the top and the bottom. So the body should appear symmetrical around the hook from the tip to the front. Um, that is messed up a little bit by the blind eye. So you have to be conscious of that. But in general, um, as you tie things off, you want the bulk, you want to be able to hide the bulk. And one of the ways to do that is to tie off things in the horizontal plane rather than the vertical plane. Because whenever you tie off material, there's always going to be some bulk. It's absolutely unavoidable. Um, but if you can hide it, it does makes your transitions smoother. I do need grab. One of the not so great things is currently with this chair that I'm using for the setup. Um, it's a little bit difficult to reach behind me to get my to get to the case. So 1 second. realized as I was trying to put together the materials for today's stream, there are still things that I don't know where they are. So those of you who have been to my stream before know that I normally have a little Altoid tin in which I keep all of my prepared golden pheasant crests. Unfortunately, I don't know where that is. So I'm sure we will find it eventually, but until then, I'm going to have to pick through a head. This one might be very well picked over already. I'm basically looking for a relatively straight crest, and I always talk about this before, but naturally straight crests, or crests which don't require that much straightening, are a little bit more durable in terms of their straightness than crests which require a lot more straightening. All feathers will eventually return to their kind of original state. So if you have to straighten crests, then just know that eventually, over years, but eventually those crests can return to, whatever crooked or twisted original form you straighten them from. And again, I'm just going to trim these extra barbs. I'm going to trim them down to stubble instead of pulling them, instead of stripping them. Because that extra stubble gives me a little extra purchase when tying it in. And do a couple wraps just to see if I got the length right, if it's good curvature. I think that looks good. Great. All right, and it has a veiling of wood duck, or summer duck, as it is occasionally called. It says summer duck in strands. So what I'm going to do is, excuse me, a little bit of a, so the interpretation of whenever it gives the instructions in strands, the interpretation I tend to take is it just means slips. Instead of being like a whole feather or like part of the feather but still attached to the stem or the rachis, I think as is properly called. So in strands just means a slip or a thin slip. You can wood duck. It's not really important to fully peel apart every strand, I don't think. I'm just going to do, again, because this is a display fly, I am going to take a few extra steps. So, for example, I am going to do matched matched slips for the veiling. Um, if this were a fishing fly, or at least a fly that wasn't going to be displayed, I would take a, excuse me, I would just take a section of wood duck flank, and I would just take a larger segment and I just fold it over. Um, that's a bit of a quick and dirty way to do duck tail veilings. Don't quite like the curvature of this. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a right at the tying point, and that'll just cause it to lay down just a little bit flatter. Excellent. I'm going to wax my thread. All right. Excuse me. I'm not used to talking this much. It's got a peacock curl butt, which will help hide a little bit of that bulk that we've created by tying in the tail. So you can see there's a little extra bulk right there. So, might be a little bit bright, actually. Let me bring back. So I'm still experimenting with the light. So hopefully I can get this a little bit better. So I know that this goes brighter. That might be as not bright as it gets. Some of that might also be the camera. You have to play around with it again because this is a new setup, so it's just a little bit still trying to figure it out. I'll do it. Right. And we'll use not folding my hurl, just pulling the fires back so they don't get trapped going the wrong direction. I mean, I suppose you could fold a hurl, right? Like, You could legitimately go and fold your hurl if you wanted. It's unnecessary, I think, but I'm sure there are people who do it and do it successfully. So why not? All right. So the only thing that I have to tie in at this point is the ribs. So we're going to go tie on our lace, which we're using. And it does say fine oval tinsel, but of course, um, my rule of thumb is uh, you go from fine, super fine on the tag, the tip of the tag, or if your tag is made up of tinsel, then you go super fine. But then for the body, you really do want something a little bit larger. On display flies, I tend to go one size of tinsel larger than it suggests, except for flat tinsel because you know convert in conversely, is that the word? Um, the for for flat tinsel, actually finer tinsel is easier to wrap, um, and that's just down to the, the physics. Um, yes, the space fillingness of flat tinsel because it is flat uh, tends not to conform as well. It's one of the reasons why you need to have a super smooth underbody for a tinsel body, for a flat tinsel body, that is. Actually, for an oval tinsel body, you also need to have a super smooth underbody, but slightly different reason. Now, I will say that this has a hackle that almost forgot. This has a hackle that starts halfway down the body, or second turn of the rib. Um, so that means we want to tie it approximately 25% of the way down. One of the things that does make flat tinsel bodies more difficult is you do have to work around the hackle if you have a situation in which the hackle starts partway down the body. So we are going to pull out our badger hackle, I guess, or honey badger hackle. Um, and we'll tie it in here. This is just a 3/0 hook, so we don't need it too broad of a hackle. And it does make it a little bit more challenging because when you go to wrap the body or wind the body on, um, it does get in the way because, as normal, we want to do a two-layer tinsel body. So 2 layers, I mean, you wrap the tinsel back down the body that way and then down the body this way. On display flies, that's a lot more important because wrapping 2 layers of tinsel covers any gaps between the wraps that you might have. like I said, with flat tinsel, it tends to conform to the underbody a little less readily than floss or dubbing. So having those two layers means that if there is a gap, or if there's a space between any wraps that you might have left, it's covered. The underbody won't show through. So I'm just gonna quickly wax this section where I'm gonna tie in the hackle, just to help secure the hackle a little bit more. Just so we don't pull it out while we're doing the rest of the stuff. Since there's nothing more annoying than getting halfway through a body and pulling out your hackle. And we'll just continue binding everything down all the way to the eye, well, to the head. And again, we're wrapping everything, or we're binding this extra bulk, these tail ends, to the bottom of the hook, because again, we want everything to be symmetrical around the hook, but we also need to make up for the bulk of the blind eye, the gut. So that's what we're doing. Again, super flat thread, always. I can trim this. Okay, and now the body is flat silver, so pull off a good amount of flat silver. Find spool. I always prefer to pull, to cut more than you need, because you can always trim it, but if you get halfway through your body and you discover you don't have enough, not good. So we have so wrap our way down. This might just make it brighter. All right, well. Do apologize if it looks like I am tying a fly from the surface of the sun. Like I said, we'll figure it out, but I just wanted to get a stream up today. Tricky part. Tie a round hackle. I will say, if I were doing a fishing fly, I wouldn't bother. I would just do one layer of tinsel for this very reason. But for display fly, I think the result is definitely worth the extra effort, because you do get a much better body with 2 layers. Even though I do have to deal with hackle. Just adjust. You want those wraps of tinsel to be right butted next to each other as tightly as possible. So you can use that bodkin just if you need. There we go. Yeah, so I do apologize. The tinsel body is making this very bright. We'll have to adjust the lighting for the next stream. We're going to do that typical thing where I do the body one week, the wing following week. But speaking of the following week, there won't be a stream next week because it is a holiday for us. It is our Thanksgiving. I know Canadians, I think you've already had yours. But for us, next week is Thanksgiving. So I'm going to go stuff my face with turkey and mashed potatoes. So no stream next week so that gluttony may be accomplished. Alright, so now I'm going to tie it off. When I tie it off, I trim it at an angle just so that it tapers up towards the front. I'm going to bind it down well. Again, at this point in the fly, because I do want to actually build up a little extra bulk right at the front. And that probably goes against what a lot of people say about classic Atlantic sandflies. But I think the biggest part is knowing where to build up bulk and where not to. And one of those places is you'll see. There are also lots of places where you can hide bulk. Under the throat and under the hurled butt are two of the best places to hide your bulk. Okay. Not fold or hackle, so we're just going to do it right here on the fly, gently pulling those fibers to the rear. Again, doesn't need to be fully folded because we can fold as we go, but just want to get those fibers started. One rogue fiber, which I just want to get right on the correct side. Move the stem as I wrap. And then we're just going to follow the back edge of that rib right up to the front. And because this has a fairly full throat, or will have a fairly full throat, you aren't going to take any extra turns up in front. So, 2. Pull it off. And bind everything down to the front. There we go. Now for the throat, which is teal, but of course I happen to have. I do happen to have lots of teal. I was gonna say I have a lot of widgeon, but that's not true. I actually have a lot of teal. Teal, widgeon, gadwall, they all look similar. They're all slightly different, but they all look similar. And depending on your fly and what other materials you end up using, uh, they're relatively interchangeable. Now, this is just a 3/0 hook, but the thing about teal and gadwall and widgeon is they all tend to be fairly long fibered in the feathers that you would use for hackles. So we'll take a little bit of selecting here. I'm looking for a symmetrical feather, and the reason why I want a symmetrical feather is just because I'm going to fold it. And if you have an asymmetrical feather, then when you fold it, you end up with one side that's longer than the other. This is not quite symmetrical, but it is relatively close. But anyway, asymmetrical feathers are more difficult to get to look right because then you get short fibers mixed with longer fibers, and it just looks a little bit off. So do that, and then so we'll put on the throat, and then we'll call it a day because we'll as usual we'll finish up the wing and the rest of the fly next week. I think I'll play around with some of the lighting next week or for next week because this is pretty bright. It's not quite right, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. So let me, as usual, lapse my thread at the tying point again, just to prevent pulling out the stem. Turns just to secure it. Take it, fold it. Get 2 wraps. And as you can see, I've left a little extra space because there will be a hurl head. Just want to pull out these fibers so they don't get caught. Tie this off. Just a couple of find everything down, get everything good. Going over just to make sure we have a smooth base for when we start adding the wing. Back to the head. We'll whip finish off the white thread. So as usual, when we go to do the wing, we'll switch to black thread. So we'll whip off the white here. And we'll start with black thread. Not next week, but the week after when we go to finish this fly. So that is the start of the silver gray. Thanks for hanging out with me this week. Thank you for your patience. As I talked about, I had to take a little bit of a break for work and also for moving. And also thank you for your continuing patience as we try to figure out what's best for this new streaming setup and what looks good. Obviously, this is a little bit bright, so. Right. Focus. So yeah. So thanks for hanging out. Good to be back. Obviously, some kinks still to work out, but we'll get them all figured out. If you enjoy what you see here, want to see more of my work, you can check out my Instagram at justwondering.brad. If you want to support the channel, purchase flies that you've seen me tie here on the stream, you can check out the Etsy shop, Studio 1213. As I mentioned, a lot of the upgrades, most of the upgrades that we've made to the equipment have been courtesy of the people who have purchased Etsy flies from the Etsy shop. So thank you to them. And like I said, no stream next week because of the holiday, but I will be streaming probably the week after, or at least there's no reason why it won't be. So thanks for hanging out today, and it's good to be back. And I'll talk to you guys later.